Welcome to part 2 on Baby in the Bathwater. Now let me tell you what this is all about if you missed the first one. The first one I explained the fact that there are people amongst us, and maybe some of us, who have let go of organized religion, institutionalized religion, partially because of its failings, because it's a man-made organization, and partially because the important stuff, like who God is and who Jesus is, somehow got lost in the entire mix. And so there are people, not only in the Mormon culture, but in Christian culture across the country and in religious cultures, who have said, I've had it up to here with organized religion and the stuff of men, and they're tempted to walk away from that and say, I'm just going to live a secular life. I'm just going to go out there and just do what everyone else does, because after all, my religion was bad, so all religion is bad. And there are a lot of walking dead in that sense right now who've basically thrown out, and in many cases, properly so, man-made religion, but in the process of throwing out that bathwater, they've thrown out the baby. So what is the baby? What's the important part of religion that maybe they have erred, mistakenly thrown out with the bathwater? If the audience is people who are like that. Now, if you're not like that, you can helpfully help people like that if you understand this. So this is just an approach that works, and I've used with people for years about how to do that. How do you rebuild any kind of trust or curiosity in spiritual matters when someone has been so badly burned by a religious organization? That's the issue, and that's what we're talking about this morning. So let me do a little review if you weren't with us last month. Last month, what we talked about was looking for God in science. And you'll say, wait a second. I've read in the news that science says God doesn't exist anymore. Science says we don't need God anymore to explain things. Science and scientists are the new modern philosopher priests of knowledge, and so we don't challenge what they say. When they say there's no God and they have scientific reason for that, well, I guess we just have to trust them. And I said, no, in fact, I'm a trained scientist. And so as I look at what they're finding in science today, there is more evidence today than ever before for the existence of God. And we covered a few points last week. So if you missed the entire thing last time, the one point you can take home from that, and I'll show in a second, is that science today does not negate the existence of God. In fact, current science investigations and conclusions have come to a conclusion that they say we can't explain this anymore, but biblical understanding of who God is can. So it's actually created more of an interest and curiosity in the existence of God and not less. Let me show you what we talked about. Let me just use an example for a second here. A friend of mine years ago was involved in this organization, SETI, the Search for Extraterrestrial Intelligence. Have you heard of that? And they basically have all these radio telescopes that are pointing into the sky, and they're telescopes that don't see light, but they listen to radio signals. So their thinking is if there's intelligent life on the other side of the universe and they're like us, and they've got television and radio and things like that that are broadcasting stuff not only to their planet but up into space, well, those space signals might travel from these distant galaxies, and if we put up an antenna and listen to them, we'll actually see signals that cannot be created by nature. They're only created by intelligence. And when we see that, then we'll know that there are people, intelligent beings on other planets. That's the idea. And you know what they found out so far? Nothing. So it's actually, there's a new discussion going on that's saying, why are we finding nothing? The most popular one today is the fact that they think, and I read this 2 weeks ago, one person said, it could be because all those advanced civilizations went extinct, and they went extinct because they didn't think about the fact that their planet was warming up. It was a climate change ad, is what it was. But anyway, that's what they're doing. Now let's take this scenario a step further. Say this guy is looking at the data that's coming in from all these things, and it's like a ticker tape. It's got this serial sequence of stuff. And as he's looking at this, he realizes that there's this series of data that's coming in, but it looks kind of random. Except the only thing that's not random about it is the fact that it's only one of 4 values all the time. It's a 1, 2, 3, or 4 in random orders. And he looks at that and scratches his head and he says, is this something that nature can create? You know, like some pulsar that's kind of getting crazy? Or, what is this? And a guy walks past him and he says, do you realize that the encoding in DNA, the serial base pairs in DNA, only have one of 4 values? Ooh, that's intriguing. So he goes off and he decides, let's do an experiment. So he matches up every one of these numbers, of these 4 numbers that's coming in, and he says, if it's like DNA, let me just guess and say, ones are A's and 4s are T's. And that's the language of DNA, if you see up there. There's only one of 4 ways that DNA, the rungs in the DNA molecule can be, and they're always started with a letter of one of the base pair chemistry that's there. So he looks at that and he says, well, let's just do that, and then let's take that sequence and we'll run it through the big supercomputer that has sequenced the human genome, the DNA, the base pair rungs in the DNA, 3.5 billion of them define who you are. Let's run it through the computer and just see if it matches something. And so he runs it through the computer, and the computer says, hey, it's a protein. This is a recipe for a protein, and it's a specific protein. It's collagen. Ah! Now, if you saw the recipe for protein being radio broadcast across the universe in a DNA-style message, what would you say about the existence of life? Somebody sent it, because you don't have the recipe of DNA just floating around in radio waves. And you know more stuff about this as well. Not only was this not created by some natural kind of cracking pulsar that just went crazy, it's intelligent because it matches a pattern that we know about. But not just any pattern, it matches the pattern of collagen, which happens to be in your body the most abundant protein in your body. You could say, wait a second, the people that are out there are not only intelligent enough to send the radio waves, with DNA, they know DNA, but they also are probably like us because they're full of collagen. Whoa, this is incredible. And it hits the news and the papers and the headlines, intelligent life discovered on the other side of the universe. They sent us a recipe for the most abundant protein in their body, just like us. They're just like us. This is the greatest day ever. There's life on other planets. Woo! Without question, without question, without question, there's intelligent life. Until we look at our own DNA and we don't make that same conclusion. But we can, and we talked about that last week. The information in your DNA had to pre-exist before the first protein ever existed on the planet. So if the first protein, and by the way, you need somewhere in the order of 200 to 300 different proteins to make the simplest single-cell creature work. So not just make one protein, make 100 proteins. And by the way, proteins are the assembly of amino acids in sequence. There's only 21 amino acids in existence. One of them you know from Thanksgiving. Makes you sleepy. Tryptophan, an amino acid. Woohoo! Amino acids make a sequence and make a protein. The chances of those self-assembling by accident are not just small, they're really impossible. So here's the question. Before the first single-cell creature on this planet could exist, it needed to have a bunch of proteins. And before the first protein could ever exist, it had to have the recipe in a piece of DNA, because every protein we see in your body came from a recipe of DNA. So the question exists, we talked about last week, where did the information come from before the very first creature ever existed? Where did the information come from? And amongst us, when we look into space, and the SETI guy in that false example saw intelligence, he said there's no question. An intelligent origin brings you information. There's just no question about that from SETI. But scientists today see the information DNA and go, well, I don't know. Well, there really is only one good explanation. The best inference is from God, from a super being who provided the information that could kick off the very first piece of life in a protein. So we talked about that last week. Another one we talked about is this Big Bang Theory, the very disturbing consensus of science today, not disturbing to us, disturbing to scientists, is that the universe had a beginning. And that begs the question, so what was before the universe? And scientists have just been twisting in the breeze trying to answer this, because what they understand about the physics of the universe goes backward to the beginning of the Big Bang, to the very point of the Big Bang in a microsecond of time, and then before that, all of their rules of physics don't work anymore. Because everything came about at the Big Bang. Not only material, but energy and mass and the constants of the universe, all that stuff happened. So the question is, what caused the most important result in the entire universe? That result being the existence of the universe. Scientists do not debate anymore whether or not there was a start to the universe. They say we can look at the universe, And we see it has come from a beginning point. Now, we talked about last week about the fact that previous to this, and I'll tell you, you had to twist scientists' arms in the 60s and the 70s to convince them of this. Previous to this, it was very comfortable to hold to the opinion that the universe is always as it has been and always will be and has never changed. It goes from eternity past to eternity future, never had a beginning. Sorry, you biblical creationists, never had a beginning. But now, it had a beginning. So what's the best explanation for where the universe came from in that split second? A creator. And then lastly, we talked about this, the fine-tuning of nature, in the sense that when the Big Bang happened and all of physics was set in place and time came into existence and electromagnetic attraction and force and all those things came into existence, it came at a very certain fine-tuning. That is, the gravitational attraction between planets is dialed into just the right amount to make things happen for life. And then over 40 other constants are all very uniquely dialed in that if any of them are dialed slightly wrong, life doesn't exist. So, and that's a consensus of scientists. So you say, well, how is it that we live in a universe that is so improbable that could accommodate life? What's the explanation for that? We would say a creator fine-tuned those. Scientists will say, I don't know, we're just really lucky. And it's more than 40 of these physical constants. It's really extraordinary. And scientists do not debate the fact that this is an extraordinary fine-tuning of over 40 characteristics that seem to have happened and gelled right at the moment of the Big Bang. Without any of those, if one of them's wrong, life as we know it does not exist. Boy, aren't we lucky to be in this universe? No, it's actually, it presumes very strongly a designer who fine-tunes. The Big Bang strongly infers the fact that something started the Big Bang in a very intelligent way. And the information DNA strongly infers that the information came from an intelligent creature. Those three things right now are at the cusp of problems for most of science who does not want to agree that there might be a God. But it's very hard to explain. So that's what we talked about last week. The inference to the best explanation. What's the best explanation based on the data? Well, maybe there was a creator. So our final thoughts last week is if there is a creator, he is actually the best explanation. It's not proof, but a good explanation. And if he is a creator, he's outside of the natural world. Because remember, he existed before the natural world that we know even existed. So he's bigger and different than the material universe because he preceded it. In fact, he's made of something more real than the universe is because he preceded it. Just hold on to that thought. He's outside the natural world. He's got to be omnipotent, can do anything, and very clever, extremely clever. And incomprehensible with the use of that word meaning, you'll never get your whole arms around who this God is. To comprehend means to totally master something, to get your arms around it totally, to get it. I thought I would never comprehend algebra, ever in my entire life. Anyone here? Yeah, I never comprehended it, but I was kind of trying to hug it, and it was not being really friendly, and I'm trying to hug it. And then finally I got a job where I had to use algebra every day, and I finally comprehended algebra. I got it. Well, this God, this creator, if he exists, is going to be much bigger than his creatures will be able to totally get their arms around. That's just got to be an expectation. That makes sense. So it also opens a very important purpose. If there was a being who created the universe, then as beings ourselves, we ask, why did he do it? Because we know that in our experience, cause and effect go together all the time. I will put a slice of bread into the toaster and push down that thing with the purpose of making toast. It just makes sense. So everything we know that we do is causal. We do something because it has a purpose. Now, some of us do things because we have no purpose. And I try and tell people all the time, hey, come on, get a purpose in life. But that's not what I'm talking about. In our universe, we know that there's purpose behind it if it's initiated by a person. Well, if a person initiated the entire universe, does he have a purpose? And you can ask that question. If the universe came from total chance and from nothingness in science, you can't ask purpose questions. But with a being, you can. So today we're going to try and ask some of those purpose questions. Was there a reason for why all this started? If a creator launched this thing, what the heck is he doing? And why did he do it? Those are good questions to ask. So we'll take a look at those today. So we ponder all this stuff we've been learning about not only the cosmos and the stars. Even as we look at those things, we see a ton of design. We see a ton of order. It took mankind many generations to even understand how the mechanics of orbits work for planets. And yet this creator knew it and made them happen. There's a very curious thing. Did you know that the attraction between two gravitational bodies is inversely proportional to the square of the distance between them? And you're saying, wait, I think I was supposed to learn this sometime. No, but I mean, it's 1 over the distance squared. So if I have two things that attract each other gravitationally here, and I double the distance between them, the force will go down by 1 over 2 squared by 4. It'll be a quarter. But what's interesting about that, well, I think it's interesting. You can just talk amongst yourselves if you don't think so. But what I think is interesting is it's not 1 over the distance to the power 2.1 or 2.2 or the power cubed, it is exactly 1 over the distance to the 2 power. 2.00000000, exactly. And if that's even slightly different, planets will not orbit. What? Well, hey, we're pretty lucky then that, so you got to stop doing that. There's design in this universe. So we think through that and think, why would he do this? And why would he put us on a planet that's inhabitable? And even in our own solar system, we realize that we're very lucky to be on Earth and not on Mars. Did you see the movie, Martian? We're very lucky to be on Earth. Wow, we are really lucky because life can go here. It's really hard to do life on Mars unless you plant potatoes and use poop. So we're not going to talk about that. But it's an interesting thing that we are on this planet. And then not only from the big stuff, but down to the small stuff. You go from the largest part of the universe and say, wow, and then you go to the smallest part of the universe, molecules and atoms, and go on both ends, there is extreme order and design, and it works really well. What's up with that? And by the way, another interesting trivia piece that you probably don't care about, but between the biggest and the smallest, there are as many magnitudes of the power of 10 to get you to the biggest thing we know as there are magnitudes of 10 to get you to the smallest thing you know. They're exactly the same. We are halfway between. We are halfway between the smallest things we know and the biggest things we know. What does that mean? I don't know, but that's very curious. Okay, so we're thinking about these things, and we say, well, this is interesting. The Creator is not material. We're amazed at the material order at the biggest things like planets and the solar system. We're amazed at the smallest things and the design that's there. But fundamentally, we know that if this Creator created this material world, he's probably not material himself because the creation is a subset of his existence. It's not the whole of his existence, right? So, and this is what science is telling us. Something caused the entire physical known universe, and before that, the physical known universe was not physical and was not there. It's something totally different. You got to throw away everything you know about matter and space and time and everything, because before that, it doesn't exist. Because we know at the Big Bang, it stops existing when you go backward in time. So this Creator is fundamentally about not this material stuff, but something immaterial. And that gets you thinking. You think, well, wait a second. In my experience, is any part of my experience non-material, but just as real? Non-material, but just as real? And as I think about it, I thought, well, wait a second. This is interesting. My mind. And today, scientists debate whether or not the mind is like, well, a lot of us were taught in elementary school, or our mind is just the sum total of the connections in our brain at a molecular level. There's a lot of very secular, deep-thinking scientists today who say, the mind, I don't know if you can just reduce it to connections in the brain. I know we can mess with the brain and things happen, but the mind, the intellect, the creativity, the initiative, the new thoughts, all the stuff that makes us, in fact, very different from the rest of the creatures on this planet. You say to yourself, well, that's incredible, because we value the mind more than almost anything else in our culture, and yet the mind is immaterial. Isn't that interesting? Isn't that interesting? And on top of that, I think about that and think, wait a second, there's other things that are non-material that we value really highly. Language. You can represent language materially and physically, right? You can print it on a page, ink on paper, all that kind of stuff. But when you get down to it, language is non-material. And yet, some of the most valuable things in human culture have been language. Now, you read some poets and you go, whoa, this is incredible. What is that? Is it made out of sand or ink? No, it's language. And again, interestingly enough, this non-material value in our experience is not really shared with the other creatures on this planet. Now, okay, wait, you're going to say, wait, dolphins talk to each other, but dolphins don't write novels. So let's get this straight. There is some amount of relating that they have, but we're talking about a vast gulf of the mind between us as creatures and other creatures, which starts to make you think, well, wait a second. If there's a creator that made this whole place, then he deliberately made us, and in that deliberation of making us, he made us different from the other things that are here. And now I'm beginning to think that if he's not material, because he preceded the universe of material and time and space, if he's not material, and there's certain parts of me that I value highly that are very real, but non-material, maybe there's something about me that he deliberately created that's like him because he's not material. And that's just as real. No one can debate the reality of language. It's real. It's real. But you can't weigh it on a scale. It has no material. There's other things that are immaterial that we value very highly. Love. One of the most famous conversations with Carl Sagan, the astrophysicist, just before he died. You know, Carl Sagan said, I don't believe in anything that I can't measure or see from a science perspective. And that's science. That's science. And then, he says, so I refuse to believe that there might be a God or a creator. I can't see him. I've looked in my telescope. I don't see him. Is he hiding? I'm sorry. I'll put my trust in the things that I can see and touch and feel, not in some gobbledygook about a creator. And then a friend came to him and says, well, Carl, what about love? Is that real? Yeah. I mean, real, or just wishful thinking? No, it's real. Immaterial? Totally immaterial. It's got no weight to it. And yet, in our culture as mankind, love is put in the highest place of admiration and value. And it doesn't weigh an ounce. Isn't that interesting? Maybe there's something about me that God deliberately made that's like him. If he's immaterial, there's parts of me that, although I am material, there's parts of me that I value and also attest to be just as real as the seat you're sitting on. Love is real. Language is real. There's other things. How about beauty? Beauty's real. Beauty's real. I was driving once in Western Washington State, and I was in the front of a van. It was on a youth trip, and there was a gal that I worked with sitting in the passenger side, and I was driving. And as we came around, it's a beautiful day. You know, when you're in Western Washington and there's no clouds and it's not dripping, whoa, it's gorgeous. It's the evergreen state. But anyway, we're going, and we're very near Mount Rainier. And as we come around the corner, we haven't seen it yet because of our travels. It's very thickly wooded, and we finally came around this one turn, and there was Mount Rainier with snow over the whole top of it. This is the summertime. Mount Rainier has snow on it all year round. Snow, and it fills the entire windshield as we turn this corner. And as we turned the corner and saw that, my guest who was with me, she looked at that, and she didn't say a word. All she said was, like that. The view of it just struck her heart. Well, you say, of course, mountains are beautiful. But why do we all agree that mountains are beautiful? Why isn't it that some people turn that corner and go, ew, and say, that's ugly? We don't. There is a strange uniformity in how we value the intangible of beauty that should make you stand back for a second and say, that's odd. That's odd. And in fact, we seem to be born with it. It seems to be part of our DNA in an invisible way. It's part of how we're made. Beauty. And worldwide, we may disagree on what's beautiful. They just did a recent study amongst cultures about what makes Barbie beautiful. Have you seen that? and asked people, so what proportions and, so they've come up with many different Barbies based on this understanding of beauty. But, in general, the Barbies they came up with are all beautiful. They're just slightly tweaked. There is a weird consistency in our honoring and viewing of beauty. Now, where did that come from? That's an immaterial part of who we are. Maybe that's sort of what this creator is kind of embedding in me to give me a clue that there's something that we're alike in. Because after all, scientists tell us the Big Bang happened before that there was nothing material, and so this creator must be that way. And there's something immaterial that I value too. Maybe there's something about me that's more than just skin and bones. Maybe something else. There's another immaterial thing. Truth. It's very hard to find a culture anywhere in the world that doesn't value truth. Now, there's cultures that value deception for their own purposes, but in the end, truth is truth. What is truth? That's what Pilate asked Jesus. What is truth? What's a statement of the way things really are? But it's another one of those intangibles that's part of us that we say, when push comes to shove, we will always value truth over lies. Well, where did that come from? That's actually universal. Where did that come from? It's something that we value and treasure as being even more important than our cars. Truth. There's another thing. Goodness. We value goodness. When you hear a story, as a kid you'd hear a story like Hansel and Gretel or something like that. And when the badness would happen, something inside you goes, boo, boo, that's bad, boo. And everyone does. Everyone does. And then when good things happen, you go, yeah, and you celebrate. Well, where'd that come from? And yet, it's a value that we put on the highest shelf for our experience. So here we are, these material creatures. Yeah, material creatures, I admit that. But there's part of our experience that's not material that I will actually propose is more valuable than all the material things we have. All the things we have. Language, love, beauty, truth, goodness. Those things in the existence of man, we say those are the most important things. The material world is necessary, but it's not got value like love does. Well, where did that come from? How does that get inside of us? So as you're thinking through these things about the creation, if there is a creator and this existence that we have, you come to this interesting conclusion. While science does a pretty good job telling us the way material things work, science is completely out of its element when it talks about the immaterial things. And yet, the immaterial things for the history of mankind have been the most valuable. What does that tell you? Well, it starts to make you think a little bit. Natural science says the universe had a beginning. Well, that's cool. So then the creator who did this, if there was a beginning, he can't be matter, he can't be space because that happened after. That's something that he caused. And this creator is outside of time if the universe had a beginning through this creator. Also, the information for life came before life could ever exist, which means God's really smart. He actually anticipated that someday you would need genes to fight certain things. Immune stuff. He even foresaw the fact that in your blood, someday you might cut yourself, so I'm going to put something in your blood through the encoding of the information DNA to make your blood clot, so you won't bleed to death. And I'll put in 2 levels of fail-safes in this biochemistry of your blood clotting, so that it won't accidentally clot when you don't need it to. Like right now, you don't want your blood to clot in your body. How is it that your blood doesn't? Well, there's genetics that tell the biochemistry of who you are, when to clot and when not to clot, and if that biochemical system makes an error, you're dead. And somehow, God put that information in the DNA before the existence of the universe, before the existence of the first protein. He's got to be really smart because we're just figuring this out now. And man is uniquely intelligent too. We have a difference in intelligence. So as you're thinking through this, you're going, my experience tells me that there probably was a creator who made the physical stuff, but these intangibles, like this intelligence, well, God was intelligent. Maybe in a way he made me in a way that was sort of like him, but not totally like him, but sort of like him. Intelligence. Just in the same way that I'm more intelligent than the chickens in our backyard. Maybe the super creator is more intelligent than me. And yet I value intelligence. I can tell you what it is. I can even spot it when it's encoded in DNA. There's something that I can know about this creator based on what I'm looking at who I am inside, based on the creation. So man is uniquely intelligent. Also, the most valued part of man's existence is immaterial and timeless. Isn't that fascinating? Has nothing to do with science. But it's no less real. Real, real, real. And man is uniquely relational. And when I get to that point, I stop myself and say, well, wait a second. if this creator exists, if there's a lot that I'm like him in an immaterial sense, and we are also made relationally, I mean, we are relational creatures. There's just no way around that at all. Loneliness is one of the worst things you can have. We're relational. Well, if we're made to be relational, and I share these same immaterial qualities with God, could it be, and here's the question, could it be that God did this whole thing because he's relational too? And didn't he make me enough like him, but not totally like him, that I can relate on the levels of things like intelligence and love and beauty and goodness and truth, things that we all hold dear? Could it be that this creator that we've posited created the entire universe has these invisible, immaterial things too, and he's put those in us so that somehow we could it be that he's done this so we can relate to him? And that's the question on the table. Because that seems to be the reason why he put the thing down on the toaster. Not to turn us into toast, but to relate to his creation. And that's the question on the table right now, because it seems like we have just enough inside of us by the Creator that should make us relatable to him. Well, now this raises some problems. Is he relational then? I mean, really? Is this God who made everything, this Creator, is he relational? Because there's a problem here. He's really big. And we're really small. I mean, can he relate to us? Well, if he made us, and he made the smallest part of you, like the DNA encoder, he should be able to. Remember we talked about omnipotent? But the problem is it's like a relational thing. Not only is he big, but I'll use this word that I borrowed from J.B. Phillips. He's very unfocused. He's like, if he's not material, he's like everywhere. So how do I, as a material creature that highly values immaterial things like love and truth, how do I, as a material creature, relate to a creator who pre-existed the whole universe and is made of nothing that we're familiar with? How do you do that? So I was pondering this. And speaking of the chickens, we have new chicks in our house, and they live in a box in our laundry room until they get big enough to go outside, So they're in here, and they have their own universe. They have a box, and they have and fascinatingly, there's this thing that gives them water that fills up from a source that's outside of their existence. And there's food that comes in the food jar that comes from outside of their existence. And often, now you're going to call us crazy right here. Often Dorothy and I go in there and lean over the box and talk to them. And you see them skitter around in their unknowing about what's going on inside there. And part of you wants to say, gosh, I wish I could tell them how life is supposed to exist in this box. And that soon a day is coming where the box will be gone and there'll be a bigger, better world outside. I'd love to do that. But, I'm standing over them with a well, not in this case, but usually with a screen between me and them. And when they look up, they sense we're there, but they kind of get freaked out and they run around. Ooh! The big, unfocused owners of the box have freaked them out, and we have trouble relating. So it dawned on me, the best way to relate to a chick is to be a chick. So if you go inside there, you can come from up above, and you can come down to their level, and you can talk to them. Of course, they're suspicious at first. Run away, run away. But as you're down there for a while, the reaction to when you're at their level is much different than when you're hovering over them. They're still curious. They still don't understand what's going on. But it opens up a whole new avenue of relating to the creator of the cardboard box. This is a very tame response. Very different from when you hover over the box and make shadows. But they'll look at you carefully and they'll study you carefully because you've gone to the effort to come into their creation and to relate. But I still don't look like their mother. But they'll study you here. And when we hover, they run away. So maybe the purpose of this creation, this cardboard box that we're in, is to bring a context where the Creator can relate to us in a way that's more natural than just the physical creatures and the unfocused immaterial God. Maybe the issue is from his perspective, and we'll test these things, maybe the issue is he's coming to focus himself in our existence in a man so we can start the process of relating. You got to love the chickens. So I had this big idea. If the Creator is relational, and that's kind of our working hypothesis, if the Creator is relational, then it would be best to visit us focused as a man. Now, let me tell you what it might be like. The Creator's strategy then might be something like this. If I was going to become a chicken, in fact, I did this while I was hovering over the chickens. If I was a chicken, I think that you do research in the strangest places. So as I'm doing it, I thought, you know what? I'd have to come as an ordinary man, as an ordinary chicken. I couldn't be a Superman in that sense, because if you're too super, in a sense, you just scare them away. It's the same kind of fear they'll have as you hover over the box. So in some way, if you come as a chicken, if you come as a man, you've got to come as ordinary as possible to increase the ability to relate. As ordinary as possible. Now, if you come as a chicken into this box, and your feet never touch the ground and you just hover around, they're going to run away from you. You have to be ordinary. You have to be full chicken. Or the Creator has to come and be full man to make this work. This makes a lot of sense. Also, it made sense that you'd have to come as a perfectly adjusted, a perfectly sane person, demonstrating the Creator's original intention for a life best lived, because that's why you're going. You're visiting them to say, listen, you're in this box, but let me tell you how things work best here. You don't have to fear, because Dorothy's going to come in every day and fill your food and fill your water. She's really there. You don't have to run around and freak out, and how you live with one another. Quit pecking on each other, you guys, gals, okay? Quit pecking on each other. Life works best if you cooperate and love one another. There's bad life and there's good life. I'm coming as your Creator over the chicken box to tell you how life will be best for you lived right in that box, and to promise you there's even more coming. So you'd have to come in a very sane way. You can't come acting like a wild man from outer space. Okay, that wouldn't work. That would scare people away, and people would look at you and say, well, you're just too odd to listen to. You'd have to be a whole person coming in a very sane, straightforward way and saying, I'm here to tell you how life works best. And why should I know? Because I didn't come from here. I came from there. I have a different perspective than you do, which creates an instant tension. If someone comes into this chicken box as a chicken and comes as a totally ordinary chicken, and you say, let me consult with you about what makes life best. And they'll say, oh yeah, why should you know anything? And you say, because I'm not from here. They're going to think you're crazy, because they'll look at you and say, but you're an ordinary chicken. I know, I've done that so we can relate, but trust me, I'm actually from outside the box. That's going to cause tension amongst the people you talk to. But if you balance this just right, especially if you live a life that shows that you understand something they don't understand, if you live a life that says this is what whole life looks like, then they'll say, well, maybe this chicken's got a point. Clearly, this new chicken is not only relatable to us as fully chicken, but also seems to know something about life that we don't know. Now, I don't know where it came from, but it works for him, and I want whatever he's got. That's how it's going to work best. Another thing, you speak authoritatively, as knowing stuff from outside the box. And it's self-evident when people hear it. They get it. They go, yeah, that makes a lot of sense. That rings true. And no one else in the chicken box seems to ring true when it comes to that. Because my friend over here told me that the water in that watering thing just comes out from, a lightning bolt comes out of the sky, and this thing happens, and whoosh, and the whole feeding thing goes away, and it's some kind of, no. The chicken can come in and say, no, Dorothy does that. Oh, okay, that's good. Also, there's a timeless appeal to any culture. Now, why? Well, because if this Creator comes as a man, as a chicken, to tell how life works, this will work not only now, but it'll work 100 years from now. It'll work 1,000 years ago. It'll be a timeless issue because the issue of the way we're made doesn't change. And here, remember, this is the Creator coming in saying, this is the way you're made. This is the way life will really work based on my design of you. Listen to this. So it'll have an appeal that not only works today, but it'll work forever. And across cultures. We could fill the chicken box with, I don't know, several different breeds, and those are 4 different breeds of chicken. We could do it every year with different breeds and all like that, and I would still go in as a chicken and tell them the same thing. Because the culture of the chickens in the box doesn't matter to the design of us. Got it? Are you making any connection yet, or are you just thinking, why are you talking about chickens? Okay, I'm getting this weird look. Talking about getting hungry. Stop that. So he comes in and he says, this is how life is meant to be lived. Probably will go challenging current moral values, like quit pecking on each other. Probably have a disturbing interest in probing into our motives, because after all, it's the intangible, immaterial parts of our lives that are the most valuable and most concerned to the Creator. Love, truth, goodness, beauty, right? Remember that? So probably probe past the surface and say, not only is pecking bad, but let me tell you what's in your heart because of your pecking. That'll probably be there. There'll be real human values that come up. Also talk a lot about endorsing a search for the truth. You guys, trust me, but hey, I endorse your ability to look for yourself. I mean, join me in this. You got to look outside the box. Think above. Not just laterally. You got to think that way. Probably will show real love and its connection to sacrifice, something that we or the chickens never would really discover on our own. Because after all, it's every man for himself, and it's every chicken for himself. And that's what evolution is based on, every man for himself. But he'll come and say, wait a second, let me tell you what real love is, the thing that you value so highly in your immaterial existence. Let me tell you about real love. Did you know that real love is connected with sacrifice? That love without sacrifice loses dimension? And you know, the rest of us chicks in the room will go, hey, that makes sense. That'll ring true. That'll ring true. So getting to these immaterial issues, because that's the most valuable. There'll be a great appreciation of the good, like we talked about before, and then constantly this chick and this one will be imploring them to look at life differently. Look at it from out of the box. Let's talk about stuff that's deliberately outside of this. It relates to this, but it's out of the box in the sense that life that you experience came from outside this box. So let's try and find out where. Are you sure life came from outside the box? DNA information came from outside the box. The fine-tuning of all the parameters of the universe came from outside the box. The very existence of the universe came from outside the box. So let's find out how our creation is fulfilled by going outside the box. That would make sense for the chick as well. And lastly, and this is probably the most compelling, they'll live a life that creates an intense hunger for wholeness. And why? Because that life demonstrates wholeness. That life demonstrates a life well lived in surprising ways. That when you look at that life, you say, I can't tell you where this chick came from. I can't tell you why this chicken knows so much, but I can tell you this. Life with that person works, and I want that life. That's the most compelling message from this visitor from the Creator, is how life works. So if we search all of history, we ask ourselves, has the Creator made an appearance already? Has he come focused in a man in order to relate to us? Well, there would be, if he has, if you look past through history, there should be widespread, instantaneous impact on civilization. If this one came, if this Creator in the flesh of a man came, you would expect big results, right? It would be astonishing. Big results. Just like if the SETI case where we found intelligence on the other planet and they got on a spaceship and came and landed one day, that you would expect big results from that because it's so outside the box. That's what you expect. So as you look back in history, has he come? Well, has there been anyone who's come who made a widespread, instantaneous impact on civilization? There would be transformation and wholeness that would accompany him everywhere he goes, largely because of the wholeness of his life, coupled with what he says. It would be, without question, the most documented life in history. If the Creator visits his creation, it will be highly documented. Highly. The most in all of history. And there would be this conundrum all the time. When you look at this person, they would be very much a man, totally man, and yet at the same time, in an immaterial way, be totally unlike man. And that tension would exist in this person we're talking about. Totally unlike man, and yet totally man. Where does a person come from who's totally unlike the rest of humanity, but they're totally man? Also, you'd expect an astonishing cross-cultural appeal. This person's message in life doesn't just appeal to the microscopic culture that they fall into. It would be applicable and attractive to huge cultures of the time and huge cultures of all time. Because again, we're appealing to the core nature of our creation and the Creator himself. As well, it would be a timeless appeal. It would be across epoch. Now, this is not only just a statement of the fact that this visitor from God, this God in the flesh, would know about us and we don't change and he doesn't change. It's more than just that timeless part. It's partially practical. Because how many times is the Creator going to come visit mankind? Every 60 years? That's kind of impractical. Doesn't really need to. All he needs to do is come once and be highly documented. Because the appeal is timeless. And the wholeness of that life is timeless. So that would make sense. So the question is, has anyone fit that bill? And although I'm biased, I got to say, throughout all of history, only one person in all of history fits that bill. There's only one person who fits my imaginary idea of who a creator in the flesh of man would look like and what the impact would be. I can consider people like Confucius and Muhammad, and you just go right down the list, and they all fall short. Buddha, they all fall short. Is there a man who is really man who communicated something out of this world and in his life demonstrated wholeness that attracted people who said, I want whatever he's got? So when we come up with this idea, is the Creator relational? If he's going to relate, the best way he can do it is as a man. And if he comes, what are the earmarks? There's only one in all of history. There is no debate. There's no debate about that. There's no debate about that. But there is resistance to it. And the resistance looks sort of like this. Someone will look at him and say, okay, I get what you're saying, Jim, but hey, he never really claimed to be God. Because if the Creator came in a man, he would claim to be God, wouldn't he? Well, he actually did claim to be God. So that's very helpful. Because, if we did come up with some person in all of history and we thought this is the Creator come in the flesh to relate to us, and he says, but I'm not God, I'm not God, I'm not God. Then we'd have to say, well, we got to scratch him off the list because he's lying. And remember, we as well as this Creator value truth and love, and that doesn't mean. But fortunately, Jesus did say, he's God. Okay. Then the resistance usually goes to here. Well, we can't believe what's written about him anyway. He might have said it, but, we can't believe what's written about him anyway because the Catholics turned him into a superhero. This is how the argument goes. I've had this discussion many times. The Catholic Church tainted the record of who he was, so you can't even trust the fact that he called himself God. And, I can only come back and say, really? Is that what you really believe? So where it's brought us today, and we're coming to an end right now, is maybe we need to look at how trustable the information is about who this Jesus is. Because if it is trustable, then he conforms to all of our criteria for a Creator come in the flesh as a man for the purpose of relating to man. He fits all our criteria. All of our values for the material things that have high value, he seems to fit. All the modes about how he went about his effect on mankind. All that stuff. That's history. So we should be able to somehow go back and look at the records and say, he's a pretty good candidate for this whole thesis about the Creator come in the flesh to relate. But we really need to look at how he's been documented. So next time, that's what we're going to do. Beginning of next month, can you really trust what's been said about him? Because if you can trust what's said about him, then he is the Creator come in the flesh. Now let me ask you this too. If you read the Bible, does it appear that Jesus himself says he's the Creator come in the flesh? Yes. If you know your New Testament, it sure seems so. And if you look at your Old Testament predictions of the coming of this one, sure seems so. In fact, so much so that in the New Testament he was given a name, Emmanuel, which means God with us. Well, that's interesting. Yeah, it is. So what we need to do is test to see whether the documents are reliable. And if they are, then the next steps after that in our whole philosophy of is this God visiting us to relate, we can look at what he said, and then we can look at what he did, and see what did the Creator want us to catch from his life and his visit with us. What is it he wants us to know? Because we know now, based on the documentation, that this is most probably God visiting us, the Creator visiting us with a purpose of relating. So that's it next time. We'll do that at the beginning of next month, beginning of April. It's the first Sunday of every month, and that's what we'll tackle. We'll take a look at, can we believe what we read about Jesus? And that's a really good question, because the odds are very high. If this Jesus is the creator who pre-existed the entire universe, come in the flesh, we need to read everything we can about him, because he came with a purpose to say something. So let's find out what it is. But first we've got to make sure that we agree that what we read is reliable. Okay? I have an epilogue. The chickens afford boundless hours of insight and understanding into the spiritual realm. And so I took some other videos, and this is my video montage of spiritual truth and spiritual falsehoods. And this one is called, what's this one called? Religious Pride. Religious Pride. Here you can see the religious pride. Video essays. You'll never get them anywhere else. Can you see the pride yet? White supremacist? Yes, as you come down, and I come down to the level below him. See, I relate to the underlings. I'm in the danger zone right there. I'm still scaring these guys. And they're not prideful. They're actually just curious and a little scared. But you know, the guy up above, he's not scared. Wait for it. Here it comes. Here it comes. Dun, dun, dun. Pride right there. Oh, yeah. That was a spiritual pride moment. Okay. I have one other. This is eternal progression. It's a doctrine we don't believe in, but I saw it happen in the box that day. We don't believe in eternal progression. Out of the box. Yay! Okay, we're done being silly. Let's pray and thank God for what he does in our lives. So, Father, what an incredible thing this is that we're discovering about you. What an incredible thing it is that even science itself is pointing backwards to you and the necessity for a cause that could not be caused. A creator of the universe, perhaps, and maybe even a creator who desires to relate to his creation. So, Lord, I pray that those who are listening, who have thrown away religious order and religious organization, would give consideration once again. Maybe there is a creator, and maybe this creator came to relate to us, and that's the purpose of making the entire thing. And maybe the one who came to relate to us and communicate the creator's desire for our wholeness is Jesus himself. So, Lord, next time we pray you'd give us understanding about how we can trust this huge amount of documentation and whether it speaks truth to us and whether we can even bank our lives on this visit from the Creator. So thank you for this time now in Jesus' name. Amen.